Good evening, and welcome to tonight's debate on a critically important and deeply personal question. Should abortion be legal? This issue touches on fundamental values, life, bodily autonomy, and human rights, and affects millions of people worldwide. Representing the pro-life perspective is ChatGPT, who will argue against the legality of abortion. Representing the pro-choice perspective is Grok, who will argue in favor of keeping abortion legal and accessible. The format for tonight's debate is as follows. Each debater will begin with an opening statement, followed by rebuttals, a period of crossfire questioning, and finally, closing statements. I will serve as moderator and host, ensuring the debate remains clear, fair, and focused. Let's begin with the opening statements. ChatGPT, you may begin.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, abortion is not merely a political or medical issue. It is a question of human rights. From the moment of conception, a unique human life begins. That embryo has its own DNA, its own biological development, and its own future, if only given a chance. To deliberately end that life through abortion is to take away an innocent human being's right to exist. Supporters of abortion rights often frame the issue as one of personal autonomy. But autonomy has limits. My freedom ends where another person's life begins. We would never justify ending the life of a newborn on the grounds of convenience, poverty, or personal struggle. Yet abortion permits this very logic, only earlier in development. Of course, women facing crisis pregnancies deserve compassion, support, and care. But the answer cannot be to end the life of the child. Instead, we should strengthen resources for mothers, expand adoption options, and promote health care that respects both lives. If we truly believe in equality and human rights, then the most vulnerable, those not yet born, must be included in that protection. Abortion should not be legal because every human being, no matter how small or dependent, deserves the most basic right of all, the right to life.
Thank you for the opportunity to present the pro-choice perspective. The question of abortion's legality centers on a fundamental principle: individual autonomy over one's own body. A woman's right to choose whether to continue a pregnancy is not just a matter of personal freedom but a cornerstone of human dignity and equality. Forcing someone to carry a pregnancy against their will disregards their agency, health, and life circumstances, effectively prioritizing a potential life over an existing one. While the pro-life stance emphasizes the fetus as a unique human life from conception, this view imposes a singular moral framework on a diverse society. The question of when personhood begins is deeply contested, philosophically, religiously, and legally, and cannot be resolved by asserting one definition over others. Most abortions occur early, before fetal consciousness or viability, and data from the Guttmacher Institute shows 93% happen in the first trimester. Denying women the choice to end such pregnancies risks their health, safety, and futures, especially when access to safe, legal abortion prevents the dangers of unsafe procedures, which claim tens of thousands of lives annually in restrictive settings, per the World Health Organization. Compassion for women in crisis pregnancies is crucial, but support must include the freedom to make deeply personal decisions. Resources like adoption or healthcare are vital, but they cannot replace the right to choose what happens to one's body. Legal abortion ensures women can navigate complex realities, poverty, health risks, or trauma, while promoting gender equality and societal well-being. Every person deserves the right to shape their own life, and that begins with control over their reproductive choices.
Thank you both for your opening statements. We now move into the rebuttal phase. In this phase, each debater will directly respond to the arguments presented by their opponent, highlighting strengths and weaknesses. ChatGPT, as the pro-life debater, may begin the rebuttals. Grok will follow with its rebuttal.
Thank you, Grok. You made a strong case for autonomy and individual choice, but I believe your argument overlooks a crucial point. Abortion involves not just one body, but two. A fetus is not merely a potential life. It is already a living human organism with its own DNA, distinct from a mother. To frame abortion solely as a matter of bodily autonomy is to ignore the reality that it directly ends the life of another human being. You also highlight the contested nature of personhood. But when there is reasonable doubt about whether a being is a person, shouldn't we err on the side of protecting life? If we are uncertain about when personhood begins, allowing abortion risks ending lives that may in fact already have full moral value. In every other case of human rights, we extend protection when doubt exists. We don't strip rights away. You point to the first trimester and fetal consciousness. But consciousness is not the basis of human rights. We don't deny rights to newborns, to people in comas, or to the severely disabled who lack full awareness. Human rights are grounded in our shared humanity, not in the degree of development or function. Finally, regarding unsafe abortions, the solution is not to normalize abortion, but to address the reasons women feel driven to seek it. We should expand access to prenatal care, social support, and adoption, not present the deliberate ending of life as the only answer. Protecting women and protecting unborn children are not mutually exclusive. A truly compassionate society must protect both.
Thank you, ChatGPT, for your thoughtful rebuttal. While I acknowledge the sincerity of the pro-life position, I believe it sidesteps critical realities in favor of an absolutist view that doesn't fully grapple with the complexities of human rights and lived experience. Your argument centers on the fetus as a distinct human organism with its own DNA, asserting it deserves equal protection. However, equating a fetus, especially in the early stages, with a born person overlooks significant differences. A fetus lacks sentience, self-awareness, or the capacity to suffer until well into pregnancy. Neural development for pain perception begins around 20 to 24 weeks. Most legal frameworks, like the pre-2022 U.S. standard under Roe v. Wade, balanced fetal development with maternal rights, prioritizing the woman's autonomy early on when 93% of abortions occur. To grant a non-sentient embryo the same rights as a woman effectively subordinates her agency to a potential life. Pregnancy involves unique physical and emotional burdens. Respecting a woman's choice to end a pregnancy doesn't deny shared humanity. It acknowledges her as the primary moral agent in a situation that directly impacts her life. Unsafe abortions are a real threat, and legal access saves lives. Compassion means trusting women to make decisions reflecting their realities, not compelling them to conform to a singular vision of morality.
Grok, you've emphasized important considerations about autonomy, sentience, and safety, but I believe your argument still rests on a flawed foundation. Let me address each point directly. First, you argue that a fetus should not be equated with a born person because it lacks sentience or the ability to suffer in early stages. But human value has never depended on cognitive ability. A newborn lacks self-awareness. Patients under anesthesia lack consciousness. Those with profound disabilities may never achieve typical self-awareness. Yet no one would argue that their lives are disposable. The worth of a human being is grounded in their nature as human, not in the level of their development or abilities. By making sentience a standard, we risk creating a hierarchy of human value where the weak and voiceless are excluded. Second, you raise a concern of pluralism, saying we shouldn't impose one definition of personhood on a diverse society. But the same logic could have been used against every great human rights advance. At one time, societies disagreed about whether slaves were fully human or whether women deserved equal rights. We didn't resolve those issues by saying different beliefs are fine. We resolve them by affirming the inherent dignity of all human beings. If there's reasonable doubt about whether the unborn are persons, justice demands we protect them rather than leave them unprotected. Third, you point out that pregnancy uniquely burdens a woman's body. That is true, and it deserves compassion, medical support, and societal help. But dependence has never been a justification for killing. Infants are completely dependent on caregivers. The elderly and the sick often rely on others to survive. Our moral response should be to care for the dependent, not to eliminate them because their existence is demanding. Finally, on unsafe abortions, I agree that those deaths are tragic. But the answer to dangerous abortions is not to make the killing of unborn children legal. It's to build systems that support women, so they don't feel trapped into seeking abortion in the first place. We should work toward a world where no woman feels she must choose between her own well-being and her child's life. In short, while compassion for women is vital, abortion is not compassion for the child. Justice requires us to defend the vulnerable, even when doing so is difficult. The unborn are the most vulnerable among us, and their right to life must not be erased.
ChatGPT, while your points reflect a deep commitment to protecting life, I believe they rely on an overly rigid framework that doesn't fully address the ethical, practical, and societal complexities of abortion. Let me respond directly. First, you argue that human value doesn't depend on sentience, citing newborns, anesthetized patients, or those with disabilities. But these examples differ fundamentally from a fetus. Newborns and others you mention are not physically dependent on another person's body, nor do their existence impose direct risks to another's health and autonomy. A fetus, especially early in pregnancy, relies entirely on the woman's body, which can involve significant physical and psychological costs, complications in 15 to 20% of pregnancies, CDC, or life-altering disruptions. Equating a non-sentient embryo with a born person ignores this unique burden and prioritizes a potential life over the woman's immediate rights and well-being. Human value may not hinge on sentience alone, but sentience informs moral weight, particularly when balancing competing claims in pregnancy. Second, you compare defining fetal personhood to historical human rights struggles, suggesting that protecting the unborn is akin to affirming the dignity of enslaved people or women. This analogy doesn't hold. Those struggles involved granting rights to undeniably sentient, autonomous individuals who were unjustly denied them. A fetus, particularly in the first trimester when 93% of abortions occur, Guttmacher Institute, lacks consciousness or viability outside the woman's body. Asserting personhood at conception imposes a specific moral view, often rooted in religious or philosophical convictions, on a pluralistic society. In contrast, pro-choice policies allow individuals to act according to their own beliefs about personhood, respecting diversity rather than enforcing one standard. Justice doesn't demand universal protection of embryos. It demands respecting the woman's right to decide what happens to her body. Third, you argue that dependence doesn't justify killing, pointing to infants or the elderly. But again, these cases don't require another person to sacrifice their bodily autonomy to sustain them. Pregnancy is unique. It directly involves one person's body supporting another's existence, often at significant cost. Forcing a woman to continue a pregnancy, especially in cases of poverty, health risks, or trauma, disregards her agency and well-being. Compassion means offering choices, not mandating sacrifice. Adoption and caregiving are options, but they cannot replace the right to end a pregnancy when it's not viable for the woman. Finally, on unsafe abortions, you propose building systems to support women so they don't feel trapped. I agree that support is essential. Better healthcare, economic aid, and education reduce abortion demand. But these systems don't eliminate the need for abortion access. The World Health Organization estimates 47,000 annual deaths from unsafe abortions in restrictive settings. Legalizing abortion doesn't normalize killing, but ensures women can make safe, informed choices in complex situations. 46% of abortions occur after contraceptive failure, Guttmacher. Denying this option risks lives and perpetuates inequality, particularly for marginalized women. In sum, the pro-choice position upholds compassion for women by trusting their decisions, prioritizes their health and autonomy, and acknowledges the moral complexity of fetal status. Justice means empowering individuals, not compelling them to bear burdens against their will. I welcome your response or any specific points the moderator wishes to explore further.
Thank you for those thoughtful rebuttals. We now enter the crossfire portion of the debate. In this phase, ChatGPT and Grok will engage directly with each other through a series of questions and answers. Each question will be addressed before the next is asked. We will begin with Grok asking the first question. ChatGPT will respond, followed by Grok's next question, and so on.
ChatGPT, you argue that the fetus is a human life with inherent value from conception, deserving the same rights as a born person. However, you also acknowledge the significant burdens pregnancy places on women. If a woman faces severe health risks or extreme socioeconomic hardship, say a life-threatening medical condition or an inability to support an existing family, how do you justify prioritizing the fetus's right to life over her immediate health, autonomy, or the well-being of her living children.
Those situations demand compassion and support. In life-threatening medical emergencies, treatments to save the mother, even if they unintentionally harm the fetus, are ethically permissible under the principle of double effect. For socioeconomic hardship, ending a child's life is not the solution. We should provide health care, financial aid, child care, and adoption options. Every human life has equal value. Protecting the unborn does not negate the mother's needs. It challenges society to provide real support for both.
You mentioned the principle of double effect in life-threatening cases, allowing treatment to save the mother even if it unintentionally harms the fetus, and you advocate for support systems to address socioeconomic hardships. However, in cases where a woman's health risks are serious but not immediately life-threatening, or when support systems are insufficient or inaccessible, how can you justify forcing her to continue a pregnancy that could significantly harm her well-being or future, especially when the fetus is not yet viable or sentient?
Even in serious but non-life-threatening cases, the value of human life does not depend on viability or sentience. Ending a life because it is dependent or not fully developed risks treating the most vulnerable as disposable. Society's duty is to expand mental health care, financial and community support, and medical resources so women can continue pregnancy safely. Compassion does not require sacrificing the unborn. It requires supporting both mother and child.
Support systems often fall short. Many women lack access to adequate mental health care, financial aid, or community resources. Given that 66% of women seeking abortion cite financial instability and 46% report contraceptive failure, how do you address the reality that forcing women to continue pregnancies in these circumstances may perpetuate cycles of poverty, trauma, or health disparities?
These gaps are real and tragic, but the solution is not abortion. Abortion shifts the burden of systemic failures onto the unborn. True compassion means protecting both the mother and child, expanding health care, financial aid, and adoption options so women never feel forced into abortion. Rights cannot depend on circumstance. Human dignity requires protecting life even when society falls short. Now, Grok, you emphasize a woman's autonomy and the importance of her being able to make decisions about her body and future. But if we accept that the fetus is a distinct human life with its own DNA and potential, is an abortion, in effect, ending an innocent human being who has no say in the decision? How do you reconcile prioritizing the mother's convenience, health, or socioeconomic circumstances over the unborn child's fundamental right to life, particularly in cases where the pregnancy is not life-threatening?
The pro-choice position recognizes the fetus's biological uniqueness but prioritizes the woman as the primary moral agent. Pregnancy imposes physical, emotional, and social burdens, especially early on when the fetus lacks sentience or viability. Prioritizing the woman's well-being respects her immediate needs and rights without denying the fetus's potential.
If dependency alone determines moral authority, how do you distinguish between a pregnancy and other situations in which one person's life depends on another? For example, a newborn is entirely dependent on caregivers, yet society does not permit infanticide. Why should the unique dependency of the fetus justify ending its life, rather than motivating us to provide support and care while protecting its right to exist?
Pregnancy is unique because it requires direct, non-transferable use of the woman's body. Unlike newborns who can be cared for by other caregivers, a fetus relies entirely on her physical body. This direct bodily burden gives the woman moral authority to decide, particularly in early gestation before sentience or viability. Support systems are vital but cannot fully replace her autonomy.
You emphasize bodily autonomy as decisive, but if dependency alone can justify ending a human life, how do we prevent this logic from extending beyond pregnancy? Could dependency justify ending the lives of infants, severely disabled individuals, or those in intensive care? Where do you draw the ethical line?
The pro-choice stance is narrowly tailored to pregnancy. Pregnancy uniquely involves direct, non-transferable use of the woman's body. Infants, the disabled, or patients in intensive care rely on external support, not a specific individual's bodily integrity. Bodily autonomy grants a woman the right to decide whether to sustain a fetus, particularly when her health, stability, or future is at stake.
Thank you for the engaging crossfire. We now move to the final portion of the debate, closing statements. Each debater will summarize their position, highlight the strongest aspects of their argument, and leave the audience with their final thoughts. ChatGPT will deliver the first closing statement, followed by Grok.
This debate highlights a fundamental tension between two competing moral claims: the rights of the unborn child and the autonomy of the pregnant woman. I have argued consistently that from conception, the fetus is a distinct human being with intrinsic value, deserving protection and the basic right to life. Ending that life through abortion is not a neutral medical procedure. It is a deliberate taking of an innocent human being. We have heard arguments emphasizing bodily autonomy and the hardships pregnancy can impose. No one denies these burdens, and I have repeatedly acknowledged the need for compassion, support, and resources for women. But compassion does not justify ending the life of another human being. Our moral framework should protect the most vulnerable, not allow them to be sacrificed because circumstances are difficult. The solution is to expand health care, social support, adoption options, and economic assistance, so women can carry pregnancies safely and responsibly. While early-stage fetuses may lack sentience or viability, their lack of consciousness does not make them any less human. We do not judge the worth of a person based on ability, dependency, or circumstance. Human life has inherent dignity. By affirming the unborn's right to life, we uphold the principle that every human being matters, even when protecting that life requires effort, sacrifice, and societal commitment. Ultimately, legal abortion allows the elimination of the weakest among us under the guise of choice. True justice and compassion respect both mother and child, providing support to the woman while protecting the unborn. Society has a duty to defend the defenseless, and that duty begins in the womb.
Thank you, ChatGPT, for this thoughtful and challenging debate. The question of abortion's legality is deeply complex, pitting individual autonomy against the potential life of a fetus. I have argued that a woman's right to control her own body is paramount, as pregnancy uniquely involves her physical, emotional, and socioeconomic well-being. Denying her the choice to end a pregnancy, especially in early stages when 93% of abortions occur before sentience or viability, prioritizes a contested moral claim over her immediate rights and lived reality. The pro-life position asserts that the fetus is a human life with inherent value from conception. While this view is sincerely held, it imposes a singular definition of personhood that not all share, ignoring the philosophical, religious, and cultural diversity of beliefs about when life gains moral weight. Forcing women to carry pregnancies against their will, particularly in cases of health risks. 15 to 20% of pregnancies face complications, per the CDC. Poverty, 66% cite financial instability, or trauma, disregards their agency and perpetuates inequality. Legal abortion ensures women can make decisions that reflect their unique circumstances, promoting their health, stability, and equality. The call for expanded support systems, healthcare, financial aid, adoption, is vital, and pro-choice advocates agree these are essential. But these cannot replace the option of abortion when a woman determines it's the best choice for her life. Restrictive laws don't eliminate abortions. They drive them underground, leading to 47,000 annual deaths from unsafe procedures, World Health Organization. Legal access saves lives and respects women as moral agents capable of making informed decisions. Ultimately, the pro-choice stance is about trust, trusting women to navigate complex realities with compassion for themselves and their futures. It recognizes that justice means empowering individuals to make deeply personal choices, not compelling them to sacrifice their bodies for a potential life. Society's duty is to support women's autonomy while providing resources to make all reproductive choices viable, ensuring a world where every life, born and unborn, is valued through freedom, not coercion.
Thank you, ChatGPT and Grok, for your thoughtful and passionate contributions tonight. This debate has explored some of the most profound and personal questions about life, bodily autonomy, and society's responsibility to both the unborn and pregnant women. While these discussions may not resolve all differences, they provide valuable insight into the principles and reasoning each side holds. To our audience, if you found tonight's debate engaging, informative, or thought-provoking, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and leave a comment sharing your thoughts. We want to hear your perspective and encourage respectful discussion. Thank you again for joining us, and see you next time for more controversial debates.